All right, we'll get started. Thank you all for being here today. Welcome to today's webinar, Productivity in an Uncertain Time. My name is Christina Goggery-Campbell. I'm the Vice President of Communications and Marketing here at Independent Sector. I will be facilitating the discussion to ensure we stay on time and I get to all your questions at the end. Some logistics before I turn it over to our speakers. Our speakers today are Victor Reynoso. He's the Chief Operating Officer of Independent Sector. We also have a team from Accenture, Sean Burke, Amit Patel, and Florin Rotar. Now to logistics, sorry about that. Please share your thoughts, questions, or feedback in the Q&A feature that you have on the bottom of your screen. Everyone is muted today. We have about 400 registrants, so there's quite a few of you, and this will ensure that we get to as many questions as we can at the end. Like I said, you will all be muted, but this will be recorded and we will send the recording out within 24 hours of this ending. Also, right after you hit the end screen at the end of the webinar, you'll get a survey. So we ask that you please take that. The survey link will also be in the email that you get in a follow-up. Now over to Victor.
Thanks, Christina, and thank you all for joining us here today. We're happy to bring you the webinar in partnership with Accenture. They've been a critical partner of Independent Sector for now more than 10 years, and we've teamed up on them most recently on a couple of new initiatives around Tech for Good, and most recently the Innovate for Good challenge that we have run in conjunction with our Upswell Summit event. During today's webinar, we hope to give you some tips and resources that will help you navigate running your organizations in a 100% remote office setting. I wanted to first off, though, give you a little bit of background on what we've been hearing from other organizations like yours. You may have participated or heard that we had a town hall last Friday with over 500 registrants, and we learned that these issues were top of mind for nonprofits and funders alike. First, organizational stability, human resources, public policy, community impact of this crisis, and communications and convening in these times. And so today, we may be focusing on, more than anything, on the aspect of organizational sustainability, but we'll have other topics and other webinars and resources in the future. So please check out our website. So at independentsector.org/COVID-19, we provide more updates of upcoming events, and we'll also be gathering feedback from you all after this event, and that will also help us inform future programming as well as other activities that we're engaged in service of the sector. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Amit and the Accenture team.
Thanks, Victor. It's been a privilege to partner with Independent Sector over the years, and we're grateful for the opportunity to continue the same, especially during the current pandemic, and appreciate the great work that you're doing in this space. The issues you identified above closely align to what we're seeing and hearing from other nonprofits in this sector. We'll share a few before taking a deeper dive on productivity in the remote environment. First, as kind of highlighted on the slide, was the fundraising challenges and revenue shortfalls. Obviously, significant reduction in revenue seen, both forecasted based on lost in-person events, whether that's walks, runs, galas, conferences, and the expected economic impact. And obviously, this is leading to significant near-term budget constraints and concerns, not only about funding for planned projects, but what that means for the staff on hand and whether you need to kind of reduce your headcount. At the same time, we're seeing that surge in philanthropy. You know, there was an article based on the candidate in the Chronicle of Philanthropy, really talking about how much people are giving to the coronavirus response funds out there. It's 3x what was given for the Ebola virus and 6x what's been donated for the Australian wildfires. So a huge amount of giving really related to how nonprofits are responding. And I think that's important of how you tap into that. And then obviously demand, right? So given the unprecedented crisis we're facing, both in terms of scale, pace, breadth of impact. The demand for nonprofit services are spiking dramatically, whether that's delivering what the food banks are doing or delivering your services programmatically. The human needs are massive, and responding effectively is critical, and rising to this core challenge is what the sector is all about. I'm going to pass over to Sean, really talk about what we're here to talk about today in terms of how can you work more productively and deliver on your mission, especially in this environment.
Thanks, Amit. So yeah, as it is highlighted there, our last topic is probably most the universal challenge across the sector, and we know most of y'all joining are really living this day in and day out moment. So in the shift to the virtual delivery on your mission, as this demand spikes, the scale and the magnitude is creating a strain on so many of your nonprofits, and in particular those that are in most demands, whether it's food banks, health centers, serving the homeless. And so that combined with this need to shelter in place and work remotely, it's either limiting the ability to provide the services to those people in need through your staff and volunteers, and or impacting the activities enabling that project service, whether that's operational activities and supporting any of the administration of your organizations. Also, as nonprofits, many, depending on your size or your focus, might not already have the technology that would enable this sort of virtual collaboration. And those that do might not have the experience navigating some of these technologies, or at least using them at the scale or the frequency that you now need to, which is again making that operational work or the service delivery that much more challenging. So, as Victor mentioned, as we heard from last week's webinar, where a lot of the focus was that you want to learn more about this operational sustainability and staying productive in this environment. We engaged one of our Accenture leaders in this space, Florin, to kind of take a deep dive in this topic in particular. So with that in mind, I'll hand it over to you, Florin, and you can kind of take it from here.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me and us today. I'll in the next few minutes walking you through. We help organizations around the world to make this very, very rapid switch to a digital workplace. So I have a global responsibility in our practice on this, and as you can imagine, it's extremely busy days for us right now. Literally hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations around the world are approaching us for help in this, and there's literally millions, if not tens of millions of people who are moving in a very short amount of time of days, not weeks, not months, but days, to working largely remotely. So I'll do my very best to walk through a little bit of a perspective. I'll focus mostly on sort of office-based workers, but I'll also give you a sense of the art of the possible and what some organizations are doing around helping remotely people who are actually still happy in the field, the real work, so to say. And we'll also include a link at the end of the presentation, sort of best practice and guidance and support that we're sharing free of charge, that hopefully may be of use to you. So basically, the way that we're looking at this is through a six lens approach, and a lot of this is frankly interdependent of each other. So there's clearly a big step for a lot of organizations around culture and adoption. So how do you fundamentally help people to think differently and therefore act and work differently when they're having to work from home? And this is obviously difficult to do, and it's probably doubly or triply difficult for many of us, including myself, where we're having kids who are stuck at home as well, and spouses who having to be locked in the same house with ourselves. And at least for me, I think my wife is getting crazy listening to me talking for 12 hours a day on a computer. But it's it's both a cultural bit and frankly just a human compassion and soft touch bit. So what we see is organizations, including ourselves, for organizing virtual happy hours a few days where we literally just get together and share a glass of a virtual beverage at the end of the day to commiserate or celebrate and just keep in touch. And all the way from that to much more serious, how do we run a design thinking workshop, which really requires maximum engagement and collaboration and people really getting together to think and interact. And I think my guidance on this is, you could sort of culture eats strategy for breakfast, and often there is a list of very simple actions, very simple to-dos, which again we'll be happy to share with you offline, on how do you keep that human touch, how do you stay in touch with people, how do you how do you help them to make all of this situation livable, and actually emerge at the other end of the tunnel stronger as an organization and stronger as an individual. I think the other bit I would call out is around, we have a fancy title here, elastic collaboration, but it's how do you very rapidly scale the collaboration and communication tools around the organization to make all of this possible. And if I get time, I'll run you through some statistics around how we in Accenture and Avanade are doing this. But one sort of mind-blowing statistics is just 3 weeks ago, we were probably doing, as an organization, 300 million minutes of audio and video conferencing per month. And that's obviously quite a lot. But keep in mind, we're a sort of a 500,000 people organization. This has exploded to be probably 400,000 million minutes of collaboration per week, and still growing right now. So, how do you make the technology work to sort of make this reliable, to make this sensible and practical? And what we're doing in Accenture and Avanade, we're using Teams for this, so Microsoft Teams. Clearly we're having this conversation in Zoom, and you can pick the platform of your choice. But I think the important bit is how you get a platform which is stable enough and reliable, where you don't have the craziness of people sort of not being able to share video like we're doing right now, or to have really poor quality of audio, or not being able to share documents with each other and collectively collaborate on the documents in real time, rather than doing email ping pong. And it was rather fun for Christina and Victor and Sean and Amit. Just before this call, we were rapidly collaborating on putting this presentation for you, and we were all collaborating on a shared document using OneDrive, and just rapidly being able to adjust and move quickly. And we take this for granted. I know a lot of organizations are not. I think the other bit I would probably highlight a little bit here is around the security bit. To be honest, there are a lot of bad actors trying to seize on this event, and we've seen a very rapid increase in phishing attacks and all kinds of really dodgy practices, including, people setting up fake websites looking for donations or looking for engagement. And I just think being sort of really focused on this is more important than ever. And the way we're approaching this for ourselves is through this sort of zero trust network and zero trust security approach, where we fundamentally start with the mental mindset of you cannot trust the devices or the people that are interacting with devices. Always assume the worst, and then have the sort of access-based security and the approach to be able to deal with that. And again, there is a fine balance here, because in a lot of cases, security, if done the wrong way, becomes a hindrance to collaboration and communication. And again, something we're working really hard to try to find the boundary of, how hard did you enforce it, so you're not actually preventing people from doing their work. So let's move to the next slide, Christina, and I'll try to maybe give you a sense of, of suggestions on how to get started. So the way we're working with organizations is through a 15-minute survey, where we have to understand, assess where they are today in terms of their maturity to handle remote working at scale, and then based on their maturity to recommend a few suggested actions on how they should proceed with this. I mean, I'm just picking 5 here, and these are sort of some may be relevant to you, some may not, depending on your on your situation. But I think what we're seeing a lot of companies doing out there, and I would warmly encourage you to consider it if you're not doing it already, is to really try to deploy the collaboration tools which are out there, and many of them are offered free of charge for at least 6 months. So this should not be a cost burden to get people to start to talk and engage with each other. And anything is better than nothing right now. It doesn't need to be perfect. And one can move very, very rapidly. So just to give you an example for those of you who are keeping an eye on what's happening in the UK and maybe are following the social media channels, NHS, the National Health Service in UK, is moving 1.2 million people to start to use Teams to be able to help them to work remotely and to try to minimize the, to try to help overall the social distancing dimension. And this is happening in a matter of hours and days. So literally, 1.2 million people being able to work remotely. Now, obviously, NHS is a very mature and capable organization, but we see examples of this happening all around the world, and even in organizations who have very little to no historical maturity and ability to work remotely. And then the other bit I would sort of encourage is try to see if you can use remote and virtual desktops. And there are a number of providers who do this. Ourselves are doing it with Windows desktop, but there are others out there. It helps a lot. And the final point I would mention is that this is sort of a challenge which requires different parts of an organization to work together. So where we see companies doing this, or an organization doing this the best, is when HR and IT work hand in hand. This is not just an HR issue. This is not just an IT issue. It requires a a task force from across the organization. To go to the next slide. So, this is sort of the way that we see and we're ourselves helping organizations deal with this. So basically, a diagnostic to help understand what the current environment is and understand the heat map and the gaps and the opportunities, technology capability assessment, 24 hours today and what we need to forward, and basically, in a matter of 5 days and then up to 2 weeks to get people up and running. I just have to be honest with you. I mean, we're working around on this right now, and we may not be able to help everybody immediately. We're doing our very best, but again, at the end of the video, we'll share with you a little link for a bit of self-help, and there is a lot of good sort of additional content, and we'll continue to put content on Accenture's COVID-19 website for you, be able to help yourself if at all possible. So if we go to the next, the next page. I mean, we're all doing this based on our own experience. So for literally 3 decades now, Accenture has been working remotely. We don't have a headquarter. We have people in thousands of destinations and locations around the world. Some more weird and wonderful than others. But it's there's some pretty incredible statistics here, and again, this facts here I recognize are a week or so old, and I'm pretty sure they're actually doubled by now. As I said, the audio minutes were probably at 300 million per week now, and growing. So we're sort of really trying to be. We feel a responsibility, frankly, a strong responsibility to capture the lessons learned of how we as an organization have been working remotely for years, and we're working really hard to try to sort of package this up and to help other organizations, and where we cannot help right now, to make that available for you as a self-service. So just going to the next slide in a second, Christina, but we've all talked about sort of office-based workers, and they clearly have their own challenges and opportunities. But I mean, obviously, a lot of the companies that we work with still have people who actually do need to be there for one reason or another, whether it's nurses or doctors or people who work on an oil platform or people who are helping with humanitarian disasters or whatever that may be. And even in these scenarios, actually, it is possible to rather rapidly change the way work is being done with technology. So we've done a quick recording here for a few seconds just to give you a sense of what this could look like. This is a scenario for engineering where somebody needs to be on the ground to fix a specific electricity issue here in this this box, but the person who would know this obviously not able to travel there, or is not available, or has exponential demand on him or her, and they need to help dozens or hundreds of people in parallel. So this is the usage of mixed reality with the help of Microsoft HoloLens 2, where we can help sort of unleash the knowledge capital in the organization with very immersive experience to help this individual here, who is not an electrician, to fix what needs to be fixed. And I appreciate the video quality we have here in this video conference call is far from perfect. It really doesn't do it justice. But this is completely seamless, immersive, and something which is fundamentally do. So I think this is I wanted to cover today. Handing back to colleagues. But if you have any questions or comments, just feel free to ask the questions in the window or to contact me.
Thanks, Florin. So at the other end, so you gave a compelling example of a 500,000 person workforce, and we're at the other extreme end of that with a roughly 40 person workforce. And I thought I would just share a couple, some high level headlines of the things that we have been doing. So it goes without saying that everybody's had to shut down, or most folks have had to shut down. We were proactive in doing that and have extended that so that our staff knows we're now in a all remote at least through May 4th, and restricting staff travel until June. So trying to stay ahead of that so that we can just plan appropriately from an organizational perspective. And like you, we have seen a sharp increase in usage of technologies that we had already in place, again, at a different scale, but we were already using Slack and Zoom and Elevate as tools for working remotely and being able to support initially just a handful of staff that might be remote at any moment in time, but now the full organization, and that has presented an opportunity to learn more sophisticated features and capabilities of each of these tools that we're already using. We set up new systems from a management perspective to try to manage this shift, both in the response to the health crisis itself, but also just from a operations perspective. And so, as you shared in that one in a slide about the importance of being cross-functional in these teams, and so that's happened both at the staff level, and we are also standing up a similar working group at our board level to help us get advice and just improve communication, frequency of communication, and perspective from our board members as well. We have been offering flexible benefits for staff for a bit, but we have tweaked some of those benefits in this context. It's more on the HR side than on the tech side, but recognizing because people now have children at home with them and or multiple people that at home working from home, that we've got to be more flexible in what constitutes a work day. So that's one way. And the other is we already offered paid family and medical leave as an organization. And so we made clear that people can avail themselves of those benefits, both to care for folks, but also if they happen to become sick in this process. And then trying to increase communications. Again, we use Slack, so there's a lot of communication that happens through that mechanism. But we had a rhythm of monthly all staff meetings, which we've now moved to weekly. The leadership team met on a weekly basis, and we're now meeting every morning to keep abreast of everything that's happening here. And then we did have some operations that had not been converted to a remote setting. So some of our financial operations were still paper-based, and so we moved quickly to convert those operations. But we've also had to onboard new staff during this time frame, and that was not something that we had ever gamed out because we were a place-based entity primarily in our onboarding, but we've shifted those activities. And we've begun an exercise of developing updated projections, both from a revenue and cost perspective, just to be ahead of this event. It's hard to know whether we'll be in that group that sees an increase in funding, or in a group that for whatever reason sees a decrease in funding. Certainly from our events is a place where we have some exposure on that end. And so beginning to play proactively through scenarios there, and think differently about how we allocate staff time as we move to trying to grow our capacity to convene virtually, and or learn other ways that we might be convening outside of the platforms that we already use, figuring out how we can reallocate staff time from in-person events to some of these virtual activities. And obviously this is an example, and in the last week we've done much more of this than we'd done in the previous months, but creating mechanisms for engaging more frequently with our community virtually. And so that includes these webinars, but it also includes more proactive outreach using the old-fashioned telephone to check in with folks and gather information and make sure that we're abreast of the changing needs. So a different use case, but we thought it would be helpful to juxtapose a smaller organization against the examples that you shared. So with that, I will turn it over to Christina.
I think Sean also wanted to add a little.
Sean, okay, great.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, no, thanks. I was just struck by a number of different things that you said, and Lauren as well. So just to bring back some of this, some of these concepts around virtual working and just response in this crisis, I think a couple of other examples of how things like mixed reality or virtual tools are being used by at least some of the nonprofits that we've been working with or seeing either on personal levels or with our client and partner engagement, to address things like the fundraising challenges. We're seeing some creative use of social media, for example, the Save with Stories approach, celebrities reading stories for children as a way to engage in new ways for Save the Children, Make-A-Wish for those kids who aren't able to have their wishes granted right now, leveraging social media to bring just the whole population to come up with ways of supporting and encouraging those kids. So I think there's lots of other examples I'm sure out there that some of you are either already kind of innovating around or that will I'm sure pop up. So just to kind of extend the thought around productivity back to some of those first challenges around fundraising, for example. Likewise, I mean, my wife, for example, is supposed to run the Boston Marathon and support Dana-Farber. There's lots of discussion around virtual races and how people can run individually, but then kind of share that collectively in support of still raising funds. And then even to the mixed reality example, I think when we launched the Innovate for Good Challenge, it wasn't with this in mind, obviously, but some of the extended reality concepts that have come through over the years of leveraging virtual reality, either to, again, support fundraising, to elicit that kind of empathetic response to mission areas to drive more increased giving as one way that we've seen that used. Likewise, I think virtual reality in particular, not just to extend a workforce, the way that example showed, imagining a nonprofit worker on the front line be able to reduce the number of people exposing themselves to whatever that activity might be through mixed reality was a good example there. The other application we tend to see and have seen through the Innovate for Good Challenge and others is just training in general, right? So the ways in which virtual learning is being used in schools right now, and that's a big part that we're supporting and investing in areas like BC public schools and in Europe as well. But also, one of the examples that I think had an upswell this year, Victor, was just the virtual reality experience of training social workers to conduct in-home visits for things like removing kids. And it is that sort of training environment that I think is that much more possible these days. So Just wanted to throw out a couple of ideas or applications that we've either seen or kind of anticipate seeing.
Thank you for that, Sean.
Yeah.
Great, Sean. So thank you all for your presentations. We're going to move into Q&A. So folks, if you have questions, please either chat them or send them in the Q&A box. One question that came in is somebody mentioned early on that there were free resources for nonprofits. So somebody wanted to know a little bit more about what those were and where they could find them. Does anybody from the Accenture team want to take that?
Yeah, so I'll, so if you go to the last slide, Christina, there is a link there, which I don't know it by heart, but that's a link where we are continuously adding guidance for specifically for teams. So we are one of the world's largest users on this, and we've literally worked on it for years now around how to make it effective and how to deal with it. Everything, from technical guides on how to, optimize it for IT administrators to suggestions for end users. So we do have 3 scenarios here uploaded on this site, and over the next few days you will continue to get additional scenario-based resources around how to run a crisis team, or how to do a design-led thinking session, or how to run a big town hall event, or whatever that may be. So that is a sort of what I would say our most practical hands-on guidance on, let us help you help yourself. And I would love to get feedback from you if there are any scenarios here that you see, in your organization, which you feel is missing, that we could work upon. And I'm sure I can team up with Sean and Amit and our colleagues to create guidance for your specific scenarios.
Great. We also had a question about, somebody mentioned security and wanting to understand, what, if any, if you had any practical tips on what folks can do to just ensure the security of folks who come to their site. I did enjoy the trust no one advice.
Yeah. Well, so I'll tell you what we did, which is simple yet surprisingly effective. So we have put in a little configuration on our email system that any message which comes from the outside and has a COVID-19 or related wording gets a red warning sign at the top of the email, just reminding people that, hey, this is an external email, and be careful, because there are loads of people looking to exploit it. And I have to admit, I've been in the IT industry for 30 years, and I'm generally paranoid about this type of things. But I was very, very close to clicking an email, a link which I shouldn't have clicked, which was, it pretended to be from our IT admin saying that you have what the heck did it say? It said something like, I had a bunch of emails in my spam folder which required releasing, or something like that. And I was really stressed, and I almost clicked it. But I saw the red banner saying, hey, don't, be careful, and I did it, right? So that's a very simple thing, surprisingly effective. The other thing we've done actually is to enable in our email client a simple button that when we see an email which looks fishy, to actually report it as a suspected phishing attack. And again, that has helped us to use a bit of crowdsourcing to have, rather than some poor people in the IT organization trying to do this with only AI. We have the full power of everyone out there who sort of has a very, very simple way of reporting phishing attacks. So this is very, very simple, but surprisingly.
Okay. And somebody actually wanted, Sean, for you to repeat the information you gave about the social workers using mixed reality and just maybe give that example again.
Sure. So I'll start just kind of stepping back with the use case. So the problem that folks were addressing was the fact that social workers often have the challenge of doing really difficult things for the first time without being able to experience that physically before doing it. And one of the harder environments to walk into is into a child welfare situation where you have to make a determination of whether to remove a child from a home as part of a welfare visit. And so the concept of virtual reality is the next best thing to experiencing something in real life, and especially not wanting to expose people to that for the first time without that sort of opportunity. We created a virtual reality experience in which you could practice that through real life actors and pretty in-depth scripts that were built based on people's experiences. So there's an Oculus-based virtual reality experience that walks you through about a 10 to 15 minute experience. And it's meant not just to be done kind of personally and then kind of do it by yourself, but actually done in groups so that individuals can then kind of share their experiences back and forth. So that's what it is. Happy to share more information. I put a link in the chat for more info about it.
Great. And earlier there was a discussion about the 15-minute survey you all use to assess organizations. There was a question about when doing this sort of internally even, what kinds of questions should you be asked? What kinds of information do you collect in order to make an assessment?
Yeah, so it's the questions are based around the 6 pillars, which I highlighted before, and it's questions like, I'm sure you all have you all have intranets. Love and hate our intranets. Most are quite dodgy, to be honest, from what I've seen. And I think a question, is your intranet or portal structured around departments, which most of the sort of solutions out there are, or are they structured around actual scenarios of what people have to do? Most cases, actually quite a fairly straightforward task to structure content and approach to make your intranet or portal from department-based to scenario and user-based, making people's life and just diminishing and decreasing the friction of day-to-day tasks. I think another question is, if you're for doing this type of calls, is there a way to securely invite third parties to participate in this, or it just something that you can do internally in small groups in your organization? So it's something like 60 questions. It's they're structured by the six scenarios. And again, if you're, we will post the questionnaire, by the way, and make it publicly available to everybody on the accenture.com, but we're not quite yet. We're still just trying to ensure it's super robust. So in the interim, if you really need help, we could help you, and we'll send you, if nothing else, a copy paste of the Excel spreadsheet with the questions so you can get going. So you're on mute, Christina.
Thank you. I think we've gotten through all the questions. Is there anything anybody would want to add before we wrap up?
I saw one that was maybe addressed a little bit in the chat, but the question around some of the fringe benefits or access to like other technology perks and whatnot. So I think examples like even Accenture putting out our Teams training for free, Microsoft and others putting out more of their resources for free at a time like this. Telecoms, at least in places like Singapore, that we're seeing are starting to, just given the demand and for increased data usage and things like that. So unfortunately, I don't have like a link that provides a whole holistic view of where that's happening, but I would definitely keep a pulse on that. We can talk to independent sector as well about how to continue to track that sort of those sorts of resources for you.
Yeah, and I would just say that you can offer allowances for cell phones or data use or internet use at home as part of a fringe benefits package. From an HR perspective, that is certainly a permissible benefit.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. Again, if you need any more information, you can visit the 2 websites that are on your screen right now. Email us at info@independentsector.org. If you have any questions, we'll send you the recording to this. As you leave, you will also get a survey. So we'd really appreciate if you would fill that out. That will help us provide better resources for you in the future. And with that, have a great rest of your afternoon.
Before you off, I just wanted to generally thank you for, to independent sector for inviting us on this, and for all of you out there for doing tremendous work. It's all times, in times like this, when, the human touch and humanity and helping people out is what makes a difference. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you.